My son left his phone on the kitchen table. I was about to bring it upstairs for him. The screen lit up with a message from my daughter-in-law. "Don't worry. The old fool still thinks we love him. Soon enough, everything he built will be ours." I said nothing. I called my lawyer. I sold my 80-acre vineyard worth $6.2 million that I had spent 40 years building. I packed my belongings myself. When they returned home, their victorious smiles disappeared in front of the locked gate. Where was the vineyard? It was gone. I'm so glad you're here with Dad's Revenge Stories. Which city or country are you watching this from? Tell me in the comments. Please note this story includes fictional elements crafted for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual names or locations is strictly coincidental, but the underlying message brings clear value. The vines never lied to me. 40 years I had been walking these rows before sunrise, running my fingers along the cordons, reading the wood, the way another man might read a newspaper. A healthy cane had a particular give to it, a slight flex that told you the sap was moving right. A stressed vine pulled tight, almost brittle under your thumb. I learned that from no book. I learned it from my wife Margaret, who had learned it from her grandfather, who had grown up on a farm outside Fresno before the war turned everything upside down. It was the third week of March 2023, and the Sonoma Valley was doing what it always did that time of year, exhaling. The hills were going green again after the gray of February, and the old vines in the West Block were just beginning to push their first buds, tiny and tight as clenched fists. I had been out since 5:30 in the morning, before the light was fully committed to the day, walking the rows the way I always did, talking to the vines under my breath the way Margaret used to tease me about. "You talk to those plants more than you talk to me," she said once, standing at the edge of the West Block in her rubber boots, her hair still loose from sleep, a mug of coffee in each hand. "The plants listen better," I told her. She laughed and handed me the coffee, and that was that. That was us. 22 years of mornings that looked exactly like that one, until the February morning 8 years ago, when she didn't wake up beside me and the bed was cold, and the world rearranged itself into a before and an after with no warning whatsoever. I pushed that thought aside the way I always did, the way you have to when there is work in front of you. I stopped at the corner post of the West Block, the one Margaret had painted white herself the summer of 1987, the summer we put the first vines in the ground. The paint had faded and chipped and been repainted a dozen times since, but I knew which layer was hers. I put my hand on the post and stood there a moment, the way I did every single morning without fail. Then I heard Derek's voice from the direction of the house. "Give it 3 months. He'll be glad we're here." I went still. The voice carried in the cool morning air the way voices do across open land. I could not hear Cass's response. She was closer to the house, her voice lower. But I heard my son's words with perfect clarity, and something about the casual certainty in them made the hair on the back of my neck rise the way it does when the barometric pressure drops before a storm. I told myself I had misheard, or misread the tone. Derek was 41 years old, and he had always been a man who spoke with more confidence than the situation called for. It was a quality that had served him well in marketing meetings and dinner parties, and less well in the quieter, more demanding conversations of real life. I knew my son. I had been knowing him since the moment the nurse put him in my arms in the maternity ward of Sonoma Valley Hospital, and he stared up at me with those dark, skeptical eyes. They had arrived 11 days ago, a Saturday, with 2 SUV loads of belongings, and a reason that had sounded reasonable enough on the phone. Derek's marketing firm in San Francisco had been struggling. The funding had dried up. He and Cass needed somewhere to land while they figured out the next step. He had called me on a Tuesday evening, voice carefully measured the way he spoke when he had rehearsed what he wanted to say. Dad, Cass and I have been talking. We think it's time we came home. I had felt something open up in my chest when he said that. The house had been quiet for 5 years. Not the comfortable quiet of a man at peace, but the particular silence of rooms that had once held a life, and now held only its furniture. I told him yes without a second thought. I cleared out the upstairs, put fresh linens on the bed in the guest room, drove to the hardware store and bought a new shower curtain, because the old one had mildew at the bottom, and I had simply never bothered to replace it for myself. Standing now at the corner post of the west block, with Derek's voice still sitting in the air around me, I replayed the call in my mind and listened for what I might have missed. Give it 3 months. Not, Dad will love having us around. Not, it'll be good for all of us. 3 months. As if there were a timeline. As if there were an outcome being anticipated. I walked back toward the equipment shed, a long, low building along the north edge of the property that held the tractor. The harvest bins, the barrel racks along the far wall. In the corner nearest the door, there was an old wooden chair, heavy handmade, the kind of piece that had been built to last, rather than to look good. Margaret's father had made it in his garage sometime in the 1960s, and it had lived in various corners of the property ever since. I had been sitting in that chair every morning for as long as I could remember, with my coffee looking out the shed door at the vines while the day came up. I sat down now and wrapped both hands around my mug and looked out at the rows. 20 years ago, a boy had stood at the edge of those same rows, 14 years old, wearing a pair of sneakers with a hole in the right toe, asking if there was any work he could do. His name was Marcus Webb, and he had ridden his bicycle 4 miles from town on a Saturday morning because someone had told him the winery sometimes hired for harvest. It wasn't harvest season. I hired him anyway. I did not know then what I was doing. I know now, but that was a thought for another morning. This morning I had my coffee and my vines, and the particular unease that had settled into my chest at the sound of my son's voice. I sat with it the way you sit with a splinter you cannot quite locate, aware of the irritation, unable yet to name the source. The sun broke fully over the ridge to the east, and the west block lit up gold and green, and it was, as it had been every morning of my life here, almost unbearably beautiful. I finished my coffee, set the mug on the arm of the chair, stood up. There was work to do. There was always work to do. And for now, that was enough to hold on to. The first 3 weeks were good. I want to be honest about that, because it would be easy now, knowing everything I know, to look back and paint those early days in darker colors than they deserved. But the truth is that for a little while the house felt like a house again. There were voices in the kitchen before I came downstairs. There was the smell of coffee already made, bacon already going in the pan, and Cass standing at the stove in one of Margaret's old aprons, the blue one with the white trim that had hung on the hook by the refrigerator for 5 years untouched. And something about the sight of it being used again instead of just hanging there made my chest loosen in a way I had not expected. Derek came out to the vines with me those first mornings. He asked questions, real questions, not polite ones. He wanted to know why I pruned the way I did, leaving 2 canes instead of 1 on the older vines. He wanted to know how I read the soil moisture without instruments, just the feel of it between my fingers. He was not a natural. His hands moved with the uncertainty of a man more accustomed to keyboards than cordons, but he was trying, and I valued trying. Margaret always said trying was the most honest thing a person could do. It was during that second week that Pete Delgado came by the way he did every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, pulling his old Ford pickup to the edge of the gravel lot and stepping out with the particular careful movement of a man whose knees had been complaining for a decade. Pete had been working this land almost as long as I had. He was 65 years old, built like a man who had spent his life outdoors, with a face that had been weathered into something close to geology. He did not say much as a rule. He observed. He assessed. He acted. In 30 years of working together, we had developed a shorthand that required very few actual words. That Monday morning, Pete watched Derek attempt to tie down a cane along the second trellis wire and said nothing for a long moment. Then he looked at me. "He's enthusiastic," Pete said. "He is," I agreed. "Enthusiasm's a start," Pete said, and went back to work. It was the most generous thing Pete Delgado had ever said about anyone he had met for the first time, and I took it as a good sign. Cass was different from Derek in the way she moved through the house. Where Derek was visible, loud, and his goodwill present in every room, Cass was efficient. She reorganized the kitchen within the first week, not dramatically, just subtly, the way a person does when they are making themselves comfortable. The spice rack moved 6 inches to the left. The dish towels were folded differently. Small adjustments, the kind that are easy to dismiss as helpfulness. And I did dismiss them, because I was glad to have someone in the house who cared about such things. I had not cared about such things since Margaret. It was a Tuesday evening, the 22nd day after they arrived, when Cass said it for the first time. We had been sitting on the back porch after dinner, the three of us, the valley going purple and gold in the late light, the way it does in April when the days start stretching out. Cass had her feet tucked under her on the wicker chair and a glass of the reserve Zinfandel in her hand, the 2019 which I had not opened for guests in 2 years, because I was saving it for a reason I had not yet identified. "I was thinking," she said, looking out at the vines, "that we should do something about the irrigation on the north slope. Our place deserves better than what that old drip system is giving it." Our place. She said it the way you say something you have been saying for years. No hesitation. No awareness that the phrase might land differently than intended. She was looking at the valley when she said it. Her voice easy and warm, and Derek nodded beside her with the same ease, and the moment passed in under 4 seconds. But I heard it. I heard it the way you hear a floorboard creak in a house you know by heart, not alarming exactly, but present. A sound that did not belong to the settled vocabulary of the building. I lifted my glass and drank, and did not say anything, because what was there to say? She was comfortable. She was nesting the way people do when they are trying to feel at home somewhere new. I had told them to come. I had made up the room. I had bought the shower curtain. I could not now resent the very comfort I had tried to create. But I set it aside carefully, the way you set aside a tool you are not sure you will need, but do not want to lose track of. Later that night, I sat in the kitchen after Derek and Cass had gone upstairs. The house had gone quiet in that specific way it does after other people's noise, a kind of ringing absence, like the air was still adjusting. I poured a small measure of brandy and sat at the table where Margaret and I had eaten 35 years of dinners, and I looked at the spice rack in its new position 6 inches to the left, and at the dish towels folded in a way that was not wrong, just different. Through the ceiling I could hear Cass's voice, not the words, just the tone. She was on the phone. Her voice was quick and clipped, nothing like the warm, easy cadence she used at the dinner table. It reminded me of something I could not immediately place. Then I placed it. It reminded me of the voice Derek had used when he called me that Tuesday evening, 2 weeks before his arrival, rehearsed, measured, careful. The voice of a person who has thought about what they want before they open their mouth. I finished the brandy, rinsed the glass, turned off the kitchen light. At the foot of the stairs, I stopped and listened. Cass was still talking. I caught one phrase before I moved away. Not enough for context, not enough to mean anything on its own. "The timeline is still good," she said. I went to bed. I lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and told myself I was a suspicious old man reading trouble into ordinary things. I had been alone too long. I was not accustomed to other people's lives moving through my space. I almost convinced myself. Almost. I have always been an early riser. Not by discipline, by disposition. My body had been waking itself at 5:15 for so many decades that the alarm clock on my nightstand existed purely as a formality, something Margaret had insisted on, and that I had never removed after she was gone. It went off every morning at 5:30, and I was always already awake, lying in the gray, pre-dawn dark, listening to the property settle around me, the way old houses do, creaking and sighing like a living thing, working out the stiffness of the night. So when I came downstairs on a Thursday morning in the second week of April and found my kitchen table buried under someone else's life, I noticed. I noticed the way you notice when something you have relied on without thinking has been quietly moved without your permission. Cass's laptop sat open at the head of the table, my end the chair I had sat in for 35 years. Beside it, 2 legal pads covered in her handwriting, a stack of folders with color-coded tabs, 3 uncapped pens, and 2 coffee mugs, both empty, both leaving rings on the wood. Margaret had refinished herself the summer of 2009 because she said the old finish had gone dull and life was too short for dull surfaces. I stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, taking it in. Then I moved to the counter, poured my coffee, and sat in Margaret's chair. Instead, the one on the side, the one she had always taken because the light from the east window hit it better in the mornings, and she liked to read with her coffee before the day started. I sat in her chair and drank my coffee and looked at the occupation of my table and said nothing, because there was nothing yet that needed to be said. Cass came down 20 minutes later in workout clothes, hair pulled back already, on the phone. She raised a hand at me, a greeting and a request for quiet simultaneously, and sat down at the laptop without moving any of it, without offering to clear the space, without seeming to register that I had displaced myself to accommodate her belongings. She was talking about Q2 projections to someone on the other end of the line, her voice carrying the clipped precision of a person in the middle of business that mattered. I finished my coffee, rinsed my mug, went out to the vines. I told Pete about it that morning while we were checking the bud break on the east block, moving slowly down the rows the way we always did, unhurried the way the work required. She sat up at the table, I said. Pete pulled a bud gently with 2 fingers, checking the development. Your table, the kitchen table. He was quiet for a moment. Did she ask? No. Pete moved to the next vine. He said. That was all. But from Pete Delgado, that particular sound carried the weight of a paragraph. I did not think much more about it until the following Saturday, when Derek appeared in the kitchen doorway at 4 in the afternoon and said in the easy tone of a man announcing something already decided, "Hey, Dad, we're having a few people over tonight. Some folks from the industry. Cass thought it would be good to start building some relationships up here." I was sitting at the kitchen table. Cass had cleared her things that afternoon, temporarily, for reasons I did not yet understand, reading the Press Democrat and drinking my second coffee of the day. I looked at my son over the top of the paper. "Tonight," I said. "Yeah, just casual. Maybe 8-9 people. Cass is handling the food." He paused. "She wanted to open a few bottles of the Reserve, the 2018 Cab, and maybe the 2017 Petite Syrah, if that's okay." The 2017 Petite Syrah was not okay. The 2017 Petite Syrah was 42 cases of the best wine I had ever made, a vintage that had required 3 years of patience and 1 perfect September, and I had been parceling it out to my best wholesale accounts at $68 a bottle because I knew what it was worth. But Derek was already moving back toward the hallway, already assuming the answer, so I said, "Fine," and went back to my paper and hated myself a little for it. They arrived at 7. 8 people, then 12, then closer to 15 industry contacts. Derek said, though the industry in question was never entirely specified. There were 2 men in sport coats who spoke the language of venture capital, a woman who described herself as a brand consultant, a younger couple who had just launched a canned wine operation out of Healdsburg. Derek circulated with the ease of a man in his natural habitat, laughing loudly, refilling glasses, steering conversations toward himself with the practiced fluency of someone who had spent 2 decades in rooms like this. Cass had arranged everything on the dining room table, my grandmother's linen tablecloth, the good stemware that lived in the cabinet above the refrigerator, a cheese board assembled with a precision that suggested advanced planning rather than improvisation. She moved through the room with a hostess's command, introducing guests, redirecting conversations, managing the evening the way a conductor manages an orchestra. I sat at the end of the dining room table and drank 1 glass of the 2017 Petite Syrah and listened. At some point, a man in a gray sport coat, one of the venture capital speakers, heavy-set, with the particular confidence of someone accustomed to being the most financially relevant person in any room, leaned toward me and said, "So you're the grandfather." I looked at him. "I'm the owner," I said. He blinked. "Oh, sorry. I thought—" He glanced toward Derek, who was across the room with his back turned, laughing at something one of the Healdsburg couple had said. Derek mentioned his family had been running the place for a few generations. I assumed 1 generation. I said, "Mine." He nodded, recalibrating, and moved on to another conversation. I looked at my wine glass. The Petite Syrah was exactly as good as I knew. It was dark and structured, with the particular mineral quality that came from that block of ancient volcanic soil on the southwest corner of the property. Margaret had always said that block tasted like the earth was trying to tell you something. After the guests left, after Derek walked the last of them to their cars, with the handshakes and the promises to follow up, I stayed at the table while Cass began collecting glasses. Derek came back in flushed with the success of the evening and dropped into the chair across from me. "Great night, Dad," he said. "These guys are going to be huge for us." He caught something in my expression and added, "For the winery, I mean." I looked at my son across my grandmother's linen tablecloth, in my dining room, in my house on my land. His eyes were bright and eager, the eyes of a man who believed the evening had gone exactly as planned. "For us," I said quietly. Derek's smile held. "Yeah," he said. "For us." I stood up, folded my napkin, and set it beside my empty glass. I said goodnight. I climbed the stairs and closed my bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, and felt for the first time since they had arrived something I recognized. Not anger, not yet. Recognition. There is a particular kind of flattery that feels like sunlight, warm, generous, impossible to object to, right up until you realize it has been burning you the whole time. Cass started coming to the winery barn in the mornings about 2 weeks after the dinner party. Not every morning. 3 times a week, maybe 4 always, with a reason that sounded reasonable. She wanted to understand the process. She wanted to appreciate what went into each vintage. She said it the way people say they want to learn a family recipe, not to replicate it, just to honor it. To understand where it came from. I believed her because I wanted to. Because teaching had always come naturally to me the way it comes naturally to people who learned everything they know from someone else and feel the debt of that. Margaret's grandfather had taught her. She had taught me. I had taught a 14-year-old boy named Marcus Webb, who showed up one Saturday with a hole in his shoe and more patience than most grown men I had known. Teaching was how I expressed respect. It was also, I see now, how I expressed trust I had not yet earned the right to give. The first morning Cass came in, she stood at the threshold of the barn and looked around with the expression of someone encountering a foreign country, wide-eyed, curious, slightly reverent. She was wearing a flannel shirt I had not seen before, old jeans boots with actual mud on them. The outfit said, "I am serious about this. I am not a guest. I am someone who belongs here." "Where do I start?" she asked. I handed her a pair of gloves and started from the beginning. I showed her the fermentation tanks, 3 stainless steel vessels along the north wall, each holding a different lot from last harvest. I explained the difference between primary and secondary fermentation, how the wild yeasts that lived naturally on the grape skins drove the first phase, converting sugars to alcohol, producing heat and carbon dioxide, and a particular kind of controlled chaos that smelled, if you were standing over the tank at the right moment, like the earth itself was breathing. She listened with her head slightly tilted the way attentive people do, and she asked good questions. Precise questions. The kind that told you the person asking had already done some reading. She had a small notebook, black cover spiral bound, the kind you buy at a drugstore. She wrote things down as I talked. I noticed the notebook on the 3rd session. I noticed it more carefully on the 5th, when I saw her write down the name of a supplier, Guadalupe Organics, out of Napa, a small family operation that had been selling me a specific strain of dry farmed compost for 11 years, a relationship built on handshakes and consistency, and the kind of mutual trust that takes a decade to establish. The name and phone number were on a card tacked to the inside of my supply cabinet, the cabinet I had left open while I was pulling out the inoculation records. I did not say anything. I told myself she was being thorough. I told myself thoroughness was admirable. Pete saw it differently. He came to me on a Wednesday afternoon, the 3rd week of May, while we were moving barrels in the cave, the underground aging room I had excavated myself in 1998 with a rented backhoe and 3 weeks of work that had nearly broken my back and absolutely broken my budget. Pete set his end of a barrel on the rack and straightened up slowly, one hand pressed to the small of his back. "She photographed your VIP list," he said. I set my end of the barrel down. "What?" "Tuesday morning, while you were on the phone with the distributor." Pete's voice was flat the way it got when he was reporting something he wished he did not have to report. She had the binder open on the workbench, took 4 pictures with her phone. Quick. Thought nobody was looking. The VIP list was 23 names: wine directors at restaurants in San Francisco, private collectors in Marin and Napa, 2 buyers from import houses in Chicago who had been purchasing from me for 15 years. It was not written down anywhere public. It existed in a single binder on my workbench, compiled over 4 decades from relationships that could not be photocopied, only inherited through trust. The list without the relationships behind it was just names. But names were a start. My jaw tightened. I could feel it the way you feel a muscle locked down when your body decides something before your mind catches up. "You're sure?" I said. "Walter." Pete looked at me with the patience of a man who had never once in 30 years told me something he was not sure of. I nodded. I turned back to the barrels and we finished moving them in silence, real silence, the kind between 2 people who have known each other long enough that quiet does not need to be filled. When we were done, I went to my workbench and opened the binder. Everything was in order. Nothing missing. Nothing obviously disturbed. Just 4 photographs now existing somewhere on Cass's phone that had not existed on Monday. That evening, Cass came to dinner with her notebook on the table beside her plate. Open to a page of questions she said she wanted to ask about the oak aging program. She smiled across the table at me, warm, open, completely at ease. "I feel like I'm finally starting to understand what makes this place so special," she said. Her voice carried genuine feeling. That was what made it hard. She was good at genuine feeling. Derek looked at me and grinned. Told you she'd get into it. I looked at Cass's notebook, at the careful handwriting filling the pages, at the black cover sitting on the table beside the breadbasket in my kitchen. My chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with my heart. You're a quick learner, I said. Cass smiled wider. I had a good teacher. After dinner, I went to the barn alone. I stood at the supply cabinet and looked at the card with Guadalupe Organics written on it in my own handwriting. Then I looked at the VIP binder. I picked it up, carried it to my office, and locked it in the bottom drawer of my desk. The one with the key I had not used in years, the one that still had Margaret's initials scratched into the metal from the day she labeled every key in the house so I would stop losing them. The key was cold in my hand. I held it there for a long moment, standing in the dark of my office, listening to the barn settle around me. Something had shifted. Not broken. Not yet. But shifted the way a foundation shifts before the cracks appear in the walls, slow and quiet, and absolutely certain of what it is becoming. The Cloverfield Gazette came out every Thursday. It had been coming out every Thursday since 1962, printed on paper, thin enough to read through if you held it to the light, delivered by a teenager on a bicycle to every address in town, whether you subscribed or not. Margaret had read it cover to cover every week for 30 years. I had read the farming section and the obituaries and ignored the rest. It was a small-town paper with small-town concerns, zoning disputes, high school sports scores, the occasional human interest piece about someone's prize-winning tomatoes, or a dog that had learned to open the refrigerator. I picked it up off the front porch on a Thursday morning in the second week of June, the way I always did, intending to take it inside with my coffee and read the farming section before heading out to the vines. The headline stopped me before I reached the door. It ran across the top of the front page in the Gazette's largest font, the one they reserved for genuine events, floods, elections, the occasional death of someone the whole town had known, the son who came home, how Derek Haynes is breathing new life into a Sonoma legend. There was a photograph beneath it. Derek standing at the corner post of the West Block, my corner post, the one Margaret had painted white in 1987, the one I put my hand on every single morning. He was smiling the wide, easy smile he had inherited from nobody in our family, one hand resting on the post, with the casual ownership of a man who had stood there 1,000 times. The vines stretched behind him in both directions, green and full in the June light, and the photograph was beautiful, and everything about it made my stomach drop in a way I had not felt since the morning the doctor called about Margaret's scan results. I sat down on the porch steps. I read the article. Lena Marsh had written it. She was the Gazette's senior reporter, which at a paper that size meant she was one of 2 full-time staff members, but she was good, careful with facts, attentive to detail, the kind of journalist who called you back to verify a quote before it ran. I had spoken with her twice over the years, once when the winery won a regional award in 2014, and once when there was a wildfire scare that came within 2 miles of the property in 2019. She had always struck me as honest. The article was not dishonest exactly. It did not contain anything that was technically false. Derek had come home. Derek was engaged with the winery. Derek did have ideas about the future. Every sentence was defensible. But the cumulative picture they assembled Derek as visionary. Derek as devoted son, Derek as the man who had seen his father's legacy and chosen to preserve and elevate it, was constructed from selective truth in the way that selective truth is most dangerous, which is to say that it felt completely real. My name appeared once, in the 6th paragraph, in a subordinate clause. His father Walter, who founded Haynes Winery in 1983, continues to work the land he has farmed for 4 decades. Continues to work. Present tense. Like a hired hand, who had been there when Derek arrived and would presumably still be there when Derek was done. Pete's truck pulled up while I was still sitting on the steps. He climbed out, saw my face, saw the paper in my hand. He walked over, and I held it out to him without a word. He read the headline, read the first 3 paragraphs, handed it back. "You okay?" he asked. His voice was careful, the way Pete's voice got when he was managing something he considered fragile. "It's just a story," I said. Pete looked at me for a long moment, with the expression of a man who had known me for 30 years and understood precisely the difference between what I said and what I meant. He did not push it. He pulled his gloves from his back pocket and headed toward the barn, and I was grateful for that, for the particular mercy of a friend who knows when to leave a thing alone. I folded the paper and went inside. Cass was at the kitchen table, her end, her laptop, her color-coded folders, and she looked up when I came in with an expression of such practiced neutrality that I understood immediately she had known the article was coming. She had known and had not told me. The neutrality on her face was the neutrality of someone who has prepared a response and is waiting to deploy it. "Did you see the piece in the Gazette?" she asked. "Just now," I said. "Lena did a good job." She paused. "It's great exposure for the winery." I poured my coffee, said nothing, looked at the counter where the paper lay folded between us. "Derek talked to her last week," Cass added. "He wanted to get ahead of the story, build some local goodwill before we roll out the new positioning." The new positioning. I turned the phrase over in my mind. It had the texture of something that had been discussed at length in rooms I had not been invited into. "What new positioning?" I asked. Cass opened her mouth, closed. It made a small adjustment in her expression that was almost invisible. "Just some ideas we've been developing. Nothing finalized." She looked back at her laptop. "We'll sit down soon and walk you through everything." I took my coffee and went to my office. I sat at my desk and opened the bottom drawer, the locked one, and confirmed that the VIP binder was exactly where I had put it. Then I looked up through the office window that faced the driveway and saw Cass's car parked at the angle it always was, slightly crooked, taking up more of the gravel space than necessary. I was still sitting there 20 minutes later when I heard her on the phone in the next room, the room that had been my reading room, then a storage space, then apparently Cass's secondary office, a transition I had not been asked about and had not objected to. Her voice carried through the wall the way voices carry through old walls, which is to say imperfectly, but enough. She was presenting something. I heard numbers, square footage, projected revenue figures, cost per case estimates for a rebranding rollout. And then clearly, unmistakably, the name on the slide she was describing to whoever was on the other end of the line. Haynes Legacy Winery. By the next generation. I set my coffee mug down on the desk. My hand was steady. I made sure of that. I pressed my palm flat against the desk surface until I was certain the steadiness was real and not performed, because there was no one in the room to perform it for. It was just me and what I had just heard, and the 40 years of my life that the words had just rearranged without my permission. I picked up the coffee again, took a slow sip. Outside the window, the vines ran in their long, straight rows toward the horizon. The same rows they had always been, indifferent to whatever was being said about them inside the house. Derek called me into the living room on a Sunday evening in the 3rd week of July with the particular energy of a man who has been waiting all day to show you something. He was standing beside the television when I came in, remote in hand weight, forward on the balls of his feet. The way he used to stand as a boy on Christmas morning, that specific combination of excitement and impatience that I had always found endearing in a child, and now found difficult to read in a man of 41. "Sit down, Dad," he said. "We want to show you something." Cass was already on the couch, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap. wearing the expression she deployed at moments she considered important. Attentive, composed, her eyes carrying just enough warmth to seem genuine. She had set 2 glasses of wine on the coffee table. The gesture had the quality of a stage prop placed there, not because anyone particularly wanted wine, but because wine belonged in the scene that was about to be performed. I sat in the armchair across from them. The one Margaret had reupholstered in 1998 in a dark green fabric she had chosen from a sample book at a store in Santa Rosa. I sat in it the way I always sat in it, straight, both feet on the floor, and waited. Derek pressed play. The title appeared first, white text on a black background, clean and expensive-looking in the way that things produced by people who understand branding always look clean and expensive. 3 generations, one vision. A small production company logo in the corner that I did not recognize. The music underneath was the kind of acoustic guitar piece that was designed to make you feel something uncomplicated, warmth, continuity, the comfort of things persisting through time. Then Derek filled the screen. He was standing in the east block, the morning light coming over the ridge behind him, the vines at peak green, and he was talking about legacy, about what it meant to come home, about the responsibility of carrying something forward that your family had built from nothing. He spoke with a fluency and conviction that I recognized not from knowing him, but from years of watching people who had practiced what they were going to say until it no longer sounded practiced. Cass appeared next in the barrel cave, her hand resting on the oak as if she had been resting it there for years. She talked about craft, about intention, about the difference between making wine and making something that meant something. She was extraordinary on camera. Her face had the quality of absolute sincerity, the kind you cannot manufacture and cannot teach, which made it either genuine or the most sophisticated performance I had ever witnessed. The video was 3 minutes and 17 seconds long. I counted. I counted because I was looking for myself, and counting gave me something precise to do while I waited. I appeared at 2 minutes and 34 seconds. I was sitting in the wooden chair outside the barn door, my chair, the one Margaret's father had built, the one that had not yet been moved at the time of filming. I was holding a coffee mug in both hands and looking out at the vines, and I had no memory of being filmed, which meant the shot had been taken without my knowledge from a distance with a long lens. 8 seconds. No voiceover. No caption identifying me by name. Just an old man in a chair framed between 2 sentences. Derek spoke about the past and the future, a visual ellipsis between what had been and what was coming. 8 seconds. Derek stopped the video when it ended and turned to me with the open, expectant face of someone awaiting approval. Cass tilted her head slightly, watching me the way she always watched me cataloging. "What do you think?" Derek asked. I looked at the dark screen. I thought about 8 seconds. I thought about the shot taken without my knowledge from a distance. I thought about the name in the title card, 3 generations, and the fact that the only 3 people who appeared in the video were Derek, Cass, and the 8-second silhouette of a man who had not been asked for his participation or his permission. "Who approved this?" I asked. Cass answered before Derek could. "We wanted it to be a surprise." Her voice was smooth, unruffled. "The production company needed final sign-off on a few things, but creatively, it's been in development for a while." "It goes live tomorrow," Derek added. "YouTube, Instagram, the winery website. We've already got the email campaign scheduled." I looked at my son. He was still holding the remote. His thumb moved across the buttons with small, involuntary movements, the nervous habit he had carried since childhood, clicking things when he was waiting for a response he was not certain of. "Okay," I said. I stood up, left the wine on the coffee table untouched. went to bed. The next morning, I was out the door at 5:15 before either of them was awake, and I drove the long way around the property to the front entrance on Cloverfield Road, the way I sometimes did when I needed the perspective of seeing the whole place from the outside before walking into it. The gate was new. Not entirely new. It was the same iron gate Margaret and I had installed in 2001, black, simple, functional. But mounted on the stone pillar to the right of it was a sign I had never seen before. Fabricated metal professional finished the new logo in full. Haynes Legacy Winery. By the next generation. The lettering was clean and modern, nothing like the original sign Margaret had designed herself on graph paper in our kitchen in 1985. The one with the simple serif font and the small illustration of a grapevine she had drawn freehand, copied to a wooden board hung on the same pillar for 38 years. The original sign was gone. I did not know when they had taken it down. I did not know where it was. I got out of the truck and stood at the gate in the early morning and looked at the new sign for a long time. My hands gripped the iron bars of the gate, cold metal dew on the surface, the chill of 6 in the morning in Sonoma Valley in late July. I gripped it until my knuckles ached. Then I got back in the truck. Sat with both hands on the steering wheel. The engine was still running. Margaret had drawn that sign on a Thursday evening in October, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a mechanical pencil, and she had shown it to me when she was done and said, "What do you think?" And I had said, "It's perfect." Because it was. Because she was. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a name I had not called in years. Gloria Trent, Margaret's old friend. I did not call yet. I was not ready yet, but I saved the number. And I drove through the gate under the new sign and went to work in my vines. The chair had been in the same corner of the equipment barn for 11 years. Before that, it had been on the back porch where Margaret used to sit in the evenings with a book and a glass of whatever we had open. Before that, it had been in the living room in the corner by the fireplace, which is where her father had originally put it when he built it sometime in the early 1960s in his garage in Modesto, using salvaged oak from a demolished schoolhouse. He had been a carpenter by trade and a perfectionist by temperament. And the chair showed both qualities, heavy, perfectly joined, built to outlast not just its maker, but the generation after him and probably the one after that. Margaret had moved it to the barn herself one afternoon, when I was out on the tractor dragging it across the gravel with Pete's help, because it was too heavy to carry. When I came in and found it, there positioned at the corner nearest the door with a clear line of sight down the main row of vines, I asked her why. "Because that's where you spend half your life," she said. "You should have somewhere decent to sit." That had been 2012. The year before she got sick. I had sat in that chair every morning since, with my coffee, watching the day come up over the vines. After she died, I sat in it longer. Sometimes I talked to her. Not out loud, just in my head, the way you carry on conversations with people you have lost, supplying both sides from memory, which becomes less accurate over time, but never stops being necessary. On a Tuesday morning in the second week of September, I came into the barn at 5:30, and the chair was gone. Not gone from the barn entirely. I found it 20 minutes later after I had checked the cave and the bottling room, and the corner behind the barrel rack where we stored the broken equipment we kept meaning to throw away. It was wedged between the back wall and the compressor unit, the large industrial compressor that ran the cooling system for the cave, which sat in the darkest, least accessible corner of the barn, surrounded by dust and the smell of machine oil. The chair had been pushed in there with enough force that one of the back legs had scraped a long mark across the concrete floor. I stood looking at it for a moment. Then I went to find Cass. She was in the driveway directing 2 men in a van who were unloading photographic equipment, lighting rigs, a backdrop frame, cases of camera gear. She was moving with the decisive energy she brought to anything she considered logistically complex, her phone to her ear, her free hand gesturing at angles and distances. Oh, Walter. She turned when she heard my boots on the gravel, and her expression arranged itself into something apologetic. I meant to tell you last night, we're doing a shoot today, some content for the website rebrand and the fall campaign. I needed the corner of the barn cleared. She glanced at the equipment being unloaded. It's just for the day. Everything goes back tonight. That corner is where I sit in the mornings, I said. I know. She tilted her head in the way she did when she was managing someone's feelings rather than responding to them. It's just a chair, Walter. We'll put it right back. Just a chair. I looked at her. She was already turning back to the van, already back on her phone. The conversation with me concluded in her accounting, before I had said what I came to say. So I said nothing more. I turned around and walked back into the barn and picked up my coffee mug from the workbench where I had set it and drank the rest of it cold, standing up, looking at the scrape mark on the concrete floor. 3 weeks later, on the first Saturday of October, I turned 68 years old. For as long as I could remember, the birthday had been marked the same way. Pete came over in the morning, and 2 or 3 of the other men I had known for decades, neighbors and old friends from the valley, would stop by during the day. We would open a bottle or two, usually something I had been saving for no particular occasion, and we would sit on the back porch and talk about nothing important, which is to say, we would talk about everything that actually mattered. Margaret had always made a lemon cake with cream cheese frosting my specific and unwavering preference, and after she died, Pete's wife Rosa had taken over the tradition without being asked, showing up every year with the cake in a carrier, refusing payment, refusing thanks beyond the first year. I woke up on that Saturday and came downstairs to find the house already busy. Derek and Cass had arranged for a full production crew, 8 people, a photographer and a videographer, and various assistants, plus a stylist, whose specific function I never clearly understood, to spend the day shooting content in the vineyard. There were equipment cases stacked in the front hall. Someone had strung additional lighting along the west block trellis wires. A catering table had been set up near the barn with coffee and pastries for the crew, positioned directly in front of the barn door. I called Pete from the kitchen. He picked up on the second ring. "There's a crew here," I said. A pause. "I know. I'm at the gate. There's a woman out here who told me the property is closed for a private event today." I walked to the front window and looked down the driveway. Pete's truck was idling at the gate. Behind it, I could see the car of one of my oldest friends, Ray Collier, who had been farming the property 2 miles east of mine for 32 years. I put on my jacket and walked down the driveway. The young woman at the gate, one of Cass's assistants, I recognized her from the barn chute, stepped aside when she saw me coming. I opened the gate myself. Pete climbed out of his truck and we shook hands the way we always did, and Ray got out of his car and shook my hand too, and the 3 of us stood there on the outside of my own gate. While inside the property, someone called out instructions about the angle of a reflector panel. Pete's truck had a cooler in the bed. Rosa's lemon cake was inside it in the carrier. Pete lifted it out and set it on the tailgate. "We can do this out here," he said. So we did. We stood at Pete's tailgate in the morning sun, the 3 of us, eating lemon cake with plastic forks from a paper bag Pete had brought, and drinking coffee from a thermos, while inside my property, a crew of 8 people photographed my vineyard for a brand that had replaced my name with a tagline. Ray lifted his coffee cup. "Happy birthday, Walter." "Thank you," I said. We stood there for a while. Nobody said very much. There was nothing that needed to be said. When Pete was leaving, he gripped my arm above the elbow, the way men of our generation express things they will not put into words, and said quietly, "Walter, there's something I need to tell you, but not today." I looked at him. His face was carrying something heavy. "Tell me now," I said. He shook his head. "Not today. It's your birthday." He squeezed my arm once and let go. Soon, Pete knocked at 6 in the morning. Not at the barn door where he usually arrived, at the back door of the house, the one that opened into the kitchen, the one that friends used and strangers did not. I heard it from upstairs, 3 deliberate knocks, and I was dressed and down the stairs in under 2 minutes. Because I had not been fully asleep anyway. I had been lying in the dark since 4:30, turning over the weight of what Pete had said at the gate the evening before, the particular gravity of his face when he said it, the way his hand had held my arm a half-second longer than necessary. I opened the back door. Pete was standing on the step in his work jacket, his old Carhartt, the color of dried mud, his hat already on despite the early hour. He was holding his phone in both hands, the way people hold things they are not sure they want to give you. "Come in," I said. He came in. He did not sit down, which told me something. Pete Delgado sat down in my kitchen the way he sat down anywhere, slowly, carefully, like a man respecting furniture, and the fact that he stayed standing meant he did not plan to be comfortable for what he was about to do. "I need you to hear something," he said. He held the phone out. His thumb found the play button with the certainty of someone who had listened to this recording multiple times already, who knew exactly where the important part began. Cass's voice came out of the small speaker. Tinny and compressed the way recorded voices always are, but recognizable, the clipped, efficient cadence she used when she believed she was unobserved. She was talking to Derek, and the acoustics of the barn gave the words a hollow quality, like listening to a conversation through a wall. "Once we get the brand repositioned," she said, "the first thing I'm cutting is that old gardener. He talks too much, and he's been here long enough to think he has opinions about how things are run." A pause. Derek's response was lower, less distinct. Then Cass again, clearly without hesitation. "Your father doesn't even understand what a P and L statement is. He has no idea what this place is actually worth. He thinks it's a farm. It's an 80-acre real estate asset with 40 years of brand equity sitting on top of it, and he's been leaving money on the table every single year because he's too attached to the way things have always been." Pete stopped the recording. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the first birds were starting in the oak tree at the edge of the yard, the same oak that had been there since before I bought the property, older than anything I had built here, older than my marriage, older than my son. I listened to the birds for a moment before I trusted myself to speak. "When did you record this?" I asked. Wednesday, 2 weeks ago." Pete's jaw was set in the way it got when he was holding something difficult steady. "They were in the barn. I had my phone in my shirt pocket recording. I do that sometimes. My hearing's been going, and I play things back later so I don't miss details about the work. I didn't know they were in there until I heard voices." I nodded. I looked at the phone in his hands, then looked away out the kitchen window at the yard. "There's more," Pete said. He sat down, then finally heavily lowering himself into the chair across from mine, with the deliberateness of a man preparing to say something that cannot be unsaid. He told me about Roy Ashworth. Roy ran the feed supply on the south end of Cloverfield Road, had for 20 years, and knew everybody's business, the way feed supply operators always do, not from nosiness, but from proximity, from the way information flows through any small community, along the routes of necessary commerce. Roy had told Pete 3 weeks ago casually, the way you mention something you assume the other person already knows. Derek and Cass had met with 3 investors from Sacramento in late September. The meeting had been at a restaurant in Healdsburg, not in Cloverfield, which Pete said Roy had noted specifically because people in this valley do not drive 40 minutes for lunch unless they are trying to keep something away from someone who might walk in. At that meeting, Derek had described the property, its acreage, its brand recognition, its untapped revenue potential. And he had explained the current situation in terms that Roy had heard secondhand from someone who had been at an adjacent table and recognized Derek from the Gazette article. Derek had told the investors that his father was in declining health, that the family was in the process of transitioning management, that Walter Haynes would be moving to an assisted living facility within the year, at which point full operational control would transfer to Derek and his wife, who were already on site and already managing day-to-day decisions within the year. I sat with that for a moment. The birds were louder now, the oak tree full of them, the sound coming through the window glass in waves. "Roy told me 3 weeks ago," Pete said. His voice had gone rough at the edges the way it did when he was angry and refusing to show it. "I kept thinking maybe I had it wrong. Maybe Roy had it wrong. I didn't want to come to you with something that might be—" He stopped, pressed his hands flat on the table. "The whole town knows Walter. Before you did. The whole town." I thought about the people I had known in Cloverfield for 30, 40 years. The ones who had watched me build this place from a piece of raw land and an idea and 4 years of wages Margaret and I had saved before we could afford the first planting. The ones who had brought food to the house when Margaret died and shaken my hand at her funeral and asked after me every time I came through town. All of them now carrying information about my future that I had not been given. "Declining health," I said. "That's what Roy heard." I stood up, walked to the counter and back. My legs needed to move. That was a physical fact, not a decision. I paced the length of the kitchen once and came back to the table and stood there with both hands on the back of my chair. "I'm 68 years old," I said. "I walked 6 miles of Vine Rose last week. I haven't seen a doctor for anything other than a checkup in 4 years." "I know," Pete said. "He told investors I was in declining health." "I know, Walter." I pulled the chair out and sat down, put both hands flat on the table the way Pete had. We sat across from each other in my kitchen in the early morning, the birds going in the oak tree outside, and I let the full shape of what I was looking at come into focus, the way you let your eyes adjust to a new light, slowly, completely, without flinching. Then I stood up again, walked down the hall to my office, opened the top drawer of the desk, and took out the business card I had moved there from the nightstand 3 weeks ago, after I had saved the number in my phone, but not yet called it. Gloria Trent, attorney at law. And on the back in Margaret's blue ink in the handwriting I would recognize in the dark, "Call her, if you ever need a real friend." I carried the card back to the kitchen, set it face up on the table between us. Pete looked at it, looked at me. "Tomorrow," I said. He nodded once. That was enough. I called Gloria Trent the next morning at 8 o'clock, sitting in my truck in the parking lot of the Cloverfield post office, because I did not want to make the call from inside the house. I had learned that lesson sometime in the past several months without fully registering, when the awareness that the walls of my own home were no longer reliably private, that voices carried through old plaster in both directions, that the particular acoustics of a house built in 1971 did not discriminate between the conversations happening inside it. She picked up on the third ring. Her voice was what I had expected from the 2 times I had met her at Margaret's side over the years, direct, unhurried, the voice of a woman who had decided a long time ago not to perform patience. She did not feel, or warmth she did not mean. "Walter Haynes," she said, as if she had been expecting the call. Perhaps she had. Perhaps Margaret had told her something I did not know about in those last months, when the 2 of them had conversations I was not part of, because Margaret had been protecting me from things she thought I would carry badly. "Gloria," I said. I need some advice. Tell me what's happening. So I told her. I sat in my truck in the post office parking lot with the engine off and the windows beginning to fog in the November morning, and I told her everything. The recording Pete had made, the investors in Healdsburg, the rebranding, the video, the sign on the gate, the VIP binder Cass had photographed. I told her in the order it had happened, because I am not a man who tells stories well out of sequence, and she listened without interrupting, which was the most useful thing anyone had done for me in months. When I finished, she said, "Do you have the deed to the property?" "In my desk, paid off in full. My name only." "Good. Don't move it. I want you to do something else for me. Before our next conversation, I want you to go through any business documents you have on the property, contracts, distribution agreements, anything with your signature on it, and pull anything that looks unfamiliar, anything you don't remember signing." I told her I would. We arranged to speak again in 2 weeks. When I hung up, I sat in the truck for another few minutes, looking at the brick face of the post office. Something in my chest had loosened very slightly, not relief exactly, more like the first millimeter of given a knot you have been pulling at for a long time. The unfamiliar document turned up 11 days later. I had been going through the filing cabinet in my office methodically, one drawer at a time, the way I approached any task that required patience, slowly, completely, without skipping. It was in the third drawer behind the current year's distribution records, in a folder I did not recognize. A contract with a Napa Valley distribution company called Meridian Beverage Group, 4 pages, standard commercial language for an exclusive distribution agreement covering a 3-year term. The contract gave Meridian exclusive rights to distribute Haynes Legacy Winery products, that name not mine, across 9 western states, at terms that were significantly below my current wholesale rates. At the bottom of the 4th page above the notary stamp was my signature. I had not signed it. I knew this the way I knew my own handwriting, which is to say, with the particular certainty of something you have looked at so many times, it has become indistinguishable from your own face in the mirror. The signature was close. Whoever had copied it had worked from a real document, probably one of the distribution agreements in the same filing cabinet, but the pressure was wrong. The way the H in Haynes lifted at the end was wrong. The pen had moved with the deliberateness of someone concentrating, not the automatic ease of a man signing his own name for the 43rd consecutive year. My hands were very steady when I put the document back in the folder. I called Gloria that afternoon. I read her the key terms of the contract over the phone while she listened and occasionally asked me to repeat a figure. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Walter, under California law, a contract signed without the knowledge or consent of the named party is void, meaning it has no legal force from the moment it was created. It cannot bind you to anything, but I need you to do something very specific." She told me not to move the document, not to confront anyone about it, and not to indicate in any way that I had found it. She told me to photograph every page with my phone, send the photographs to her email address, and return the folder to exactly the position I had found it in. This was important, she said, because the document was evidence and evidence had to be preserved in its original condition to be useful. I did exactly what she said. I photographed each page against the surface of my desk, sent the images, replaced the folder. Then I went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee and stood at the counter drinking it, looking out the window at the vines. 3 weeks passed. I moved through the house and the property the way I had been moving for months, steadily, quietly performing the ordinary rhythms of a man with nothing particular on his mind. I walked the rows. I ate dinner with Derek and Cass. I answered their questions about the upcoming harvest projections and the barrel aging schedule. I said nothing about the document. I said nothing about Gloria. I said nothing about Pete's recording or the investors in Healdsburg or the words that had been sitting in my chest since the morning Pete played them for me in my kitchen. I had learned over the course of a life spent farming that the worst thing you can do when something critical is developing underground is disturb the soil above it. Then on a morning in the second week of January 2024, I came downstairs to find Derek's phone on the kitchen table. He had left for an early errand and must have forgotten it. The screen was still lit the way it stays lit when a message arrives, and no one dismisses it. I picked it up to set it by the stairs so he would find it when he came back. That was all I intended to do. But the screen was facing me, and the message preview was visible without unlocking anything, and I read it before I understood what I was reading. It was from Cass. Sent at 6:47 in the morning while I had been out walking the rows. Don't worry. The old fool still thinks we love him. Soon enough, everything he built will be ours. I set the phone back down on the table, exactly where it had been. I did not move it to the stairs. I stood in my own kitchen and read those words again in my memory, and felt something that was not anger, something quieter and more final than anger. The particular clarity of a man who has been almost seeing something for a very long time and has now seen it completely. I looked out the window at the 40 acres of vines I had planted and tended and spoken to under my breath for 4 decades. The vines my wife had loved. The land that had my name on its deed, and until this morning, my son's assumption written over every inch of it. I walked straight out to my truck, drove past the gate and pulled into the gravel turnout near the old creek bridge where no one could see me. My hands were calm as I dialed Gloria's direct line. She answered on the very first ring. "Walter," she stated quietly. "Gloria," I said, looking toward the ridgeline. "It's time to set things in motion." Today, Derek came to my office on a Tuesday evening in the first week of February, and I knew before he opened his mouth that something was coming. I knew it the way you know weather before it arrives. Not from a single sign, but from the accumulation of small indicators that your body registers before your mind catches up. The way he had been quieter than usual at dinner. The way Cass had excused herself early, which she never did when the conversation was ordinary. The way Derek knocked on my office door with 2 knocks instead of 1, which was the pattern he had used as a teenager when he was about to ask for something he already suspected I would say no to. "Got a minute, Dad?" he said. "Come in," I said. He sat in the chair across from my desk, the wooden chin chair with the straight back that I kept there for exactly this purpose, for conversations that needed to be conducted at a desk rather than around a kitchen table. He had a folder with him, which he set on his knee without opening, and he looked at me with the expression he had been working up to all evening. "I want to talk about the West Block," he said. "The West Block. The oldest section of the property. 4 acres of head-trained vines planted in the spring of 1987. The year our son turned 4 years old. The year Margaret decided she was done waiting to put the first permanent vines in the ground, and spent 3 weeks on her knees in the April mud setting each plant herself because she said she wanted to know every one of them by hand. She had talked to them while she planted. I had watched from the fence line, pretending not to, because she would have been embarrassed if she thought I could hear. Those vines were 37 years old. In the wine world, vines that age were not liabilities. They were the closest thing the industry had to sacred. "What about it?" I said. Derek opened the folder. He laid 3 pages on my desk, architectural renderings, printed in color, the kind of professional presentation you commission when you have already decided what you want and need the visuals to do the persuading for you. The first page showed an aerial view of the property with the West Block outlined in red and a proposed structure superimposed over it. A building. Long, low, glass-fronted, the kind of architecture that photographs well from drones and appears in travel magazines. "We've been talking to a design firm in San Francisco," Derek said. The concept is a destination dining experience. Farm-to-table, hyper-local, the whole positioning. There's also a glamping component, 8 to 12 luxury tent sites along the northern edge with views of the valley. He tapped the second page, which showed the tent configurations. The revenue projections are significant, Dad. We're talking about tripling the property's annual income within 3 years of opening. I looked at the renderings. I looked at the red outline over the west block. I looked at the tent sites positioned along the ridge where Margaret used to walk in the evenings, where I could still find her boot prints in my memory if I went there on the right kind of morning. You'd need to pull the vines, I said. The west block vines, yes. He said it with the steadiness of someone who had rehearsed this particular sentence many times. They're old growth, Dad. The yield per acre is well below commercial viability. We'd be replacing 4 acres of underperforming vines with a revenue stream that— Who planted those vines? I asked. Derek stopped. He knew the answer. He had known it since he was 4 years old, since he was old enough to understand what the West Block meant and why his mother walked there the way she did with that specific quality of attention she brought to the things she had made. Mom did, he said. His voice dropped slightly on the word mom, a reflex he could not help, the same reflex that made him look away from me for a half-second before he looked back. But Dad, she's been gone 5 years. The vines don't know that. They're just vines. They're just vines. I looked at my son across the desk. He was 41 years old, and he was sitting in my office in the house he had grown up in, on the land his mother had put her hands into for 35 years, telling me that the vines she had planted one by one on her knees in the April mud were just vines. I did not raise my voice. I had not raised my voice at Derek since he was 16 years old and had said something cruel to Margaret at the dinner table, something he had apologized for within the hour and never repeated. I was not going to raise it now. Those aren't underperforming vines, I said. They're Zinfandel planted from cuttings I brought from a vineyard in Dry Creek Valley that has been farming the same rootstock since 1951. Old vines produce lower yields and more concentrated fruit. Every winemaker in this valley would give their right hand for a block of 37-year-old Zinfandel, and you want to pull them to put up tent sites. Derek's jaw tightened. Dad, I haven't finished. I kept my voice level. The revenue projections your design firm gave you are based on comparable properties in Napa, which operate in a different market segment and draw a different visitor profile than Sonoma. I've seen this model fail twice in this valley in the past 10 years. I know the owners of both properties. I watched them pull their vines and build their restaurants, and I watched what happened when the tourism cycle turned. Derek was quiet. He was looking at the renderings on my desk. Then the office door opened. Cass stepped in, not as if she had been listening at the door, which she had been, but with the composed entrance of someone arriving at exactly the moment they had planned to arrive. She was carrying a second folder thicker than Derek's, and she set it on the desk beside the renderings without asking. Shilaku. We put together a full financial model, she said. Her voice was warm, reasonable, the voice she used when she wanted to sound collaborative. We thought it might help to see the full picture, Walter. The numbers really do tell a compelling story. I looked at the folder she had placed on my desk. I looked at the renderings Derek had laid out. I looked at the red outline over the west block over 4 acres of 37-year-old vines that Margaret Haynes had planted by hand in the spring of 1987, one at a time on her knees in the mud, talking to each one. I picked up the folder Cass had brought. I held it for a moment, feeling its weight, the weight of the financial projections inside it, the work hours behind it, the planning that had gone into this presentation. The assumption embedded in every page that this conversation would end the way they had decided it would end. Then I set it back down on the desk on top of Derek's renderings, and I folded my hands in my lap. I need to think about it, I said. Derek looked at Cass. A flicker passed between them, not quite relief, but the loosening that comes when something you feared has not happened yet. Of course, Cass said. Take your time. I stood up. I said goodnight. I walked out of my office and through the kitchen and out the back door into the February night. The air was cold and clean, the way Sonoma Valley air gets in February, carrying the mineral smell of wet soil and the distant sweetness of the eucalyptus windbreak along the property's eastern edge. I walked to the west block. I stood at the corner post, Margaret's post, the white one she had painted herself. I put both hands on it. The wood was cold and rough under my palms, and I stood there in the dark and felt the full weight of what I had just been asked to do. And I knew with the particular clarity of a man who has finally stopped pretending that I had already made my decision. I had made it before Derek walked through my office door. I had made it the morning Pete played me that recording. I had made it the day I read the words on the gate and understood that the name I had built over 40 years had been quietly moved to a footnote. I had been ready for months. I just hadn't said so out loud. I took my phone from my pocket. Found the number Gloria had sent me 3 days earlier, Marcus Webb, Oregon. I stared at it for a moment in the dark, the old vines around me, Margaret's post under my hand. Then I typed one line and pressed send. It's Walter Haynes. Gloria said you'd be expecting this. I'd like to meet. I put the phone back in my pocket. Stood there until the cold worked through my jacket. Then I went inside. Gloria picked up on the first ring. I was still standing at the corner post of the west block, my hand on the white wood Margaret had painted the February night, pressing in around me from all sides with the particular weight of a night that has been waiting for something to happen. I could see the lights of the house from where I stood, the kitchen window warm and yellow, the office window where Derek and Cass were presumably still sitting with their renderings and their financial projections and their assumptions about how the conversation had gone. Walter, Gloria said. Not a question. A statement of presence the way she always answered, as if the act of saying your name was itself a form of attention. I need to move forward, I said. Whatever we need to do, I'm ready to do it. A pause. Not hesitation, Gloria Trent did not hesitate. It was the pause of a person shifting from one mode of engagement to another, from listener to strategist. All right, she said. Come in Thursday. Bring the deed, the distribution contract, and anything else you've photographed. We'll talk through the full picture, and I'll tell you exactly what your options are. There's one more thing, I said. There's someone I want to bring into this. Someone I'd like you to talk to. Who? A man named Marcus Webb. He used to work here. 20 years ago when he was young. He has his own operation now up in Oregon. I haven't spoken to him in years, but Pete has. Pete says he's doing well. A silence on the line. Then Gloria said, What are you thinking, Walter? I'm thinking, I said, that the right person to have this land is someone who already knows what it is. I heard her write something down. I'll look him up before Thursday. Get me his contact information when you can. I hung up and stood in the dark. For another few minutes, my hand still on the post. The vines around me were dormant in the February cold, the canes bare and gray, the kind of bare that looked like death to someone who did not know better, and looked like patience to someone who did. In 6 weeks, they would push their first buds. In 7 months, if the season held, they would give their fruit. They had been doing this for 37 years, and they would keep doing it long after everyone currently arguing about them was gone. I went back inside. I said nothing to Derek or Cass about the call. I said goodnight and went to bed and slept better than I had in months. Thursday came. I told Derek and Cass I was driving to Santa Rosa for supplies, which was not entirely untrue. I stopped at the farm supply store on the way back, and bought 2 bags of soil amendment I had been meaning to pick up. I arrived at Gloria's office at 9 in the morning. She was already at her desk, coffee-made legal pad open, the reading glasses she used for documents pushed up on her forehead, the way she wore them when she was thinking rather than reading. She was 60 years old, Gloria Trent. She had been Margaret's closest friend from the years before I knew Margaret. They had met in college, lost touch, found each other again in their 30s with the intensity of people who recognize that a particular friendship is too valuable to let go of twice. I had known Gloria at the edges of my marriage for over 20 years at dinner parties and holiday gatherings, and the occasional afternoon when she came out to the property and she and Margaret sat on the back porch and talked in the way that old friends talk, which is to say without explaining anything because everything important was already understood. I had not spent time alone with her since the funeral. Being here felt like something Margaret had arranged. "Sit down, Walter," she said. "Tell me about Marcus Webb." So I did. I told her about the Saturday morning in 2003 when a 14-year-old boy had appeared at the edge of the East Block with a bicycle and a hole in the right toe of his sneaker, asking if there was any work. I told her about the 4 years he had worked the property before leaving for college on a partial scholarship, about the way he had absorbed everything I could teach him with the specific hunger of a person who had found the thing they were made for. I told her about the card he had sent from Oregon 7 years ago, a photograph of his first bottling a small production Pinot Noir, with a note on the back that said simply, "Everything I know I learned in Cloverfield." Gloria listened with her pen moving steadily across the legal pad. When I finished, she said, "I spoke with him yesterday." I looked up. "You called him. You gave me his number Wednesday night. I called Thursday morning." A small correction, she had beaten me to it, which was exactly the kind of efficiency Margaret had always admired in her. "He is," she said carefully, "exactly what you described, and he is very interested in what I outlined to him." My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with distress. It was the feeling of a thing that has been uncertain for a long time, becoming certain, the specific relief of a foundation settling. "He wants to come down," Gloria said. "See the property. Talk to you." "When?" "He suggested next week. I told him I'd confirm after speaking with you today." I nodded, looked at my hands on my knees. Outside Gloria's window, the March light was coming through the blinds in thin strips, laying itself across the floor, in a pattern that reminded me of something I could not immediately name, the light through the barn door in the early mornings. Maybe that specific angle before the sun cleared the ridge fully. We spent the next hour going through the documents. Gloria spread the photographs of the distribution contract across her desk and went through each page with a yellow highlighter marking the specific language that confirmed the signature was not mine, and the terms that would have bound the winery to below-market rates for 3 years. She explained again, slowly and precisely, what void meant under California contract law, that the document had no legal force, that Meridian Beverage Group had no claim, that any attempt to enforce it would fail the moment it was challenged by an attorney with the original evidence. Then she turned to a fresh page on her legal pad and said, "Now, let's talk about the transfer." She walked me through the mechanics of a property sale in California. The purchase agreement, the title search, the deed transfer recorded with the Sonoma County Recorder's Office, the role of a title company in the transaction. She explained that as sole owner of the property, with a clear title and no liens, I had the legal right to sell to any buyer I chose at any price I negotiated without notifying or obtaining consent from any other party, including family members residing on the property. She said this slowly and clearly, once in the way of a person who understands that some information needs to be delivered without softening. "They cannot stop this," she said. "Not legally. Not in any way that would hold up." I sat with that for a moment. The morning light moved across Gloria's office floor, as the sun shifted the strips, widening slowly, the way they do as the day opens up. "There is one thing I want to be clear about," I said. "I want Marcus to keep the name. Haynes Winery. On the label, on the gate, everywhere it has always been." Gloria looked at me over her reading glasses. "That will be a condition of the sale. That will be a condition of the sale." She wrote it down, underlined it once, turned the pad so I could see it. Outside, a bird landed on the window and sat there for a moment, a small brown sparrow, the kind you see everywhere in the valley in March, unremarkable, persistent, completely at ease with the world it inhabited. It looked in through the glass for a second, then was gone. I picked up my coffee cup. It had gone cold while we talked. I drank it anyway. He was already inside when I arrived. I had chosen the coffee shop on the south end of Cloverfield's Main Street, a place called Groundwork, which had been there since the early 90s, run for the past 12 years, by a woman named Darlene, who knew everyone in town by name and their order by memory, and had the particular gift of leaving people alone when they needed to be left alone. It was not a place Derek and Cass frequented. That had been the primary criterion. I pushed through the door at 9 in the morning on a Tuesday in the second week of April, and I saw him immediately sitting at the corner table with his back to the wall, the way people sit when they have learned somewhere along the way to keep an eye on the room. He was 42 years old. I had not seen him in person since he was 22, the summer he came back to say goodbye, before he drove north to Oregon with everything he owned in the bed of a borrowed pickup truck. He had been a lean, serious young man then, with the particular self-containment of someone who had grown up with very little and learned early not to take up more space than he needed. He was still lean, still serious, but the self-containment had become something else, not tightness, but density, the quality of a man who had become comfortable with the weight of his own competence. His hands were on the table when I walked in, and I could see from across the room that they were a working man's hands, the knuckle, the callus, the particular broadening across the palm that comes from years of physical work. They were my hands 30 years ago. I had not expected that to hit me the way it did. He stood when he saw me. He did not smile immediately the way people smile when they are performing a reunion. He looked at me with the directness of someone who understood that this meeting was not a social occasion, that something real was being conducted here, and that real things deserved to be met straight on. We shook hands. His grip was what I expected, firm, brief, no theater. "Walter," he said. "Marcus," I said. "Sit down." We sat. Darlene brought coffee without being asked. She had seen me come in and knew what I drank, and she brought 2 cups, which told me she had clocked the situation and understood this was not a conversation that needed interrupting. I was grateful for that. I was grateful in that moment for every person in my life who had the sense to know when to step back. Marcus wrapped both hands around his mug. He looked at me across the table with an expression I needed a moment to identify, because it was not one I had been seeing much of lately. It was respect. Simple, unperformed, the kind that does not announce itself. "Gloria explained the situation," he said. "I want to hear it from you." So I told him. I told him everything from the beginning, from the Tuesday evening Derek called, and I felt something open in my chest that I had mistaken for hope. I told him about the recording and the investors and the email with the line about Q3. I told him about the West Block and the renderings and the red outline over the vines Margaret had planted. I talked for a long time, and he listened the way Pete listened, without interrupting, without arranging his face into expressions of sympathy that were really just impatience in disguise. He listened the way a person listens when they are actually taking something in, rather than waiting for their turn. When I finished the coffee and my cup had gone cold, I did not remember drinking any of it. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He looked at the table, then back at me, and something moved across his face, not pity, which I could not have borne, but something older and less comfortable than pity. Recognition. The particular recognition of a man who understood what it meant to have something you had built with your hands treated as a resource to be extracted. When I was 14 years old, he said, my mother was working 2 jobs and we were 3 months behind on rent. I rode my bicycle out to your property on a Saturday morning because someone at school said the winery sometimes hired kids for harvest. You told me it wasn't harvest season. He paused. Then you told me to lock up my bike and come find you in the barn. I remembered. The bicycle had been a girl's bike too small for him. With a bent front wheel, he had straightened himself with a pair of pliers. He had ridden it 4 miles on a flat tire for the last half mile because he had not wanted to turn back. You paid me in cash every Friday, Marcus said. You never once made me feel like I owed you for the opportunity. You just treated it like an arrangement between 2 people who each had something the other one needed. His jaw tightened for a moment. That's not a small thing. Most people in your position would have made a boy like me feel the difference in our positions every single day. You never did. My throat had gone tight in a way I had not anticipated. I pressed my hand flat on the table and kept my eyes level and breathed through it the way I had been breathing through things for months. The West Block, I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. Margaret planted those vines. I need someone who understands what that means. Marcus looked at me steadily. I know what it means, he said. I was there the spring she put them in. I was 17. She let me help with the last row. He stopped, cleared his throat once quickly. I remember exactly where each plant went. I could walk that block blindfolded. The sound that came out of me was not a word. It was something older than words, something that had been sitting in my chest for 5 years, since the February morning I woke up and the bed was cold, and it moved through me and was gone. And I pressed my hand harder on the table and looked at the window and let 30 seconds pass before I trusted my voice again. Gloria told you the terms, I said. She did. The name stays. Haynes Winery. On the gate, on the label, everywhere. Walter. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his elbows on the table, his working man's hands wrapped around the mug. I have had your name on my bottles for 7 years, since my first vintage. It's on the back label of every case I have ever produced. He reached into his jacket pocket and set something on the table between us, a small bottle, dark glass, simple label. I recognized the handwriting on it because it was mine from a note I had written him the summer he left for college, and he had reproduced it, letter for letter, on the back of every bottle he had made since. Everything worth knowing about wine I learned from the land. W. Haynes, Cloverfield, CA. I picked up the bottle. My hands were not entirely steady. I set it back down. You kept it, I said. I kept it, he said. I'm not buying your winery, Walter. I'm keeping it alive for you. Outside on the main street of Cloverfield, a delivery truck rumbled past, and a dog barked twice somewhere down the block. And the ordinary world continued in its ordinary way, indifferent to what had just happened, at the corner table of a coffee shop, where a woman named Darlene knew everyone's order by heart and had the good sense to leave people alone. I looked at Marcus Webb across the table, 42 years old, a 14-year-old boy with a bent wheel and a flat tire and 4 miles behind him, and more determination than most men I had known in a lifetime. Okay, I said. It was the same word I had said to Derek the night of the video, but it meant something entirely different this time, and both Marcus and I understood the difference without having to say so. The 40 days that followed were the strangest of my life. Not because anything dramatic happened during them, Quite the opposite. The 40 days were strange precisely because nothing on the surface changed at all. I woke at 5:15, walked the rows, ate breakfast, worked the property, ate dinner with Derek, and Cass answered their questions about the upcoming harvest projections and the barrel rotation schedule, said, "Good night," went to bed. The rhythms of the house and the land continued exactly as they had for months, with the same faces at the same table at the same hours. And if you had stood outside the kitchen window and watched us through the glass, you would have seen nothing to indicate that anything had shifted. But underneath everything was moving. Gloria filed the paperwork with the title company the week after my meeting with Marcus. The title search on the property took 8 days, a standard process in California, whereby a licensed title company examines the chain of ownership going back through all recorded transactions to confirm that the seller holds clear title and that no liens, encumbrances, or competing claims exist against the property. In my case, the search was straightforward. The deed was in my name, and my name only had been since 1983, and the mortgage had been paid off in full 11 years ago. The title came back clean in 8 days, exactly as Gloria had said it would. Marcus drove down from Oregon on a Thursday, while Derek and Cass were in San Francisco for what they described as a meeting with potential brand partners. Pete let him in through the east gate. I met them both at the edge of the west block, and the three of us walked the property for 2 hours, every row, every block, the cave, the barn, the equipment shed. Marcus moved through the vines the way I moved through them, with his hands out reading the wood, stopping to crouch at the base of an old trunk and press 2 fingers into the soil the way I had taught him 20 years ago. At the west block he stopped for a long time. He stood at the corner post, Margaret's post, and looked down the rows without speaking. His jaw worked once. Then he turned to Pete and said, "What's the water situation on this block in August?" Pete told him. They talked irrigation for 10 minutes, 2 men who understood the land they were standing on, and I stood back and listened and felt something in my chest that I recognized after a moment as the specific relief of watching something you love pass into hands that deserve it. We signed the purchase agreement that afternoon in Gloria's office. Marcus had arranged financing through an agricultural lending institution in Portland, a standard commercial real estate loan secured against his existing Oregon property and the projected revenue of the acquisition. The agreed purchase price was $6.2 million, a figure Gloria had negotiated over 3 weeks of quiet back and forth that I had deliberately stayed out of because I trusted her judgment and did not want the number to become the point. The point was never the money. Gloria walked us through each page of the 41-page document, pausing at the conditions of sale to read the relevant clause aloud and confirm that both parties understood its terms. The clause read, "Buyer agrees to maintain the trade name Haynes Winery in perpetuity on all product labels, signage, and public-facing materials associated with the property and its operations." Marcus signed without hesitation. I signed beside him. Gloria notarized both signatures and told us she would file the deed transfer with the Sonoma County Recorder's Office within the week. The transaction would be a matter of public record at that point, recorded permanent, irreversible. I drove home in the late afternoon, with the sun dropping behind the western ridge, the valley going gold the way it did at this hour in May, and I felt for the entire 40-minute drive something I had not felt in a year and a half. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter than happiness and more durable. The feeling of a man who has done the thing that needed to be done. At home, Derek was back from San Francisco, flushed and energetic, talking about the brand partners meeting over dinner with the enthusiasm of a man who believed the story was still unfolding in his favor. He described the partner, the projections, the opportunities. He used the word "we" 17 times. I counted because counting gave me something to do with my hands, while I sat across from him and listened and said the things a man says at dinner. Yes, that sounds interesting. Tell me more, pass the bread. Cass watched me across the table with the particular attention she always brought to my face. Reading it, the way she read everything for information, for advantage, for the gaps between what I said and what I meant. She was good at that. She had always been good at that. But there was nothing in my face that evening for her to find, because I had spent 40 years learning to read weather and 40 years learning not to show it. And I was in this particular moment as closed as I had ever been. After dinner, I went to the barn. Pete was there finishing up the last of the evening checks on the fermentation tanks. The temperature gauges the CO2 levels. He looked up when I came in. "It's done," I said. Pete set down his clipboard. He looked at me for a moment with the expression of a man absorbing news he has been waiting a long time to receive. "Gloria filed," he said. "Files with the recorder's office this week. It'll be public record by Thursday." Pete picked up his clipboard again, wrote something on it, put it back on its hook. Then he turned to me and said, "Derek's planning a party. Did you know that?" I had not known that. "What kind of party?" "A big one. He told Roy at the feed store yesterday that he's planning a public announcement event at the property, end of next month, inviting press investors the whole valley." Pete's voice was carefully level. "He's going to announce himself as the new owner of Haynes Winery." I stood in the barn in the evening light, between the fermentation tanks and the barrel racks on the floor. I had swept 10,000 times under the roof I had repaired with my own hands after the storm of 2017 took out the northeast corner. I thought about Derek standing at a microphone in front of the valley, announcing a thing that was no longer true. I thought about Gloria walking in with a 41-page document and a deed transfer filed with the Sonoma County Recorder's Office. Something moved through me that I had not felt since I was a much younger man, standing in a field I had just bought. For more money than I had any business spending, looking at the first rows of vines Margaret and I had strung together on a Saturday in October, with borrowed wire and second-hand posts. It was not anger. It was not satisfaction. It was something cleaner than both. I looked at Pete. "Let him plan it," I said. Pete held my gaze for a long moment. Then the corner of his mouth moved not quite a smile, but the direction of one which was as far as Pete Delgado's face generally traveled in that direction. "All right," he said. He picked up his jacket from the hook by the door. "Good night, Walter." "Good night, Pete," I said. I stayed in the barn alone for a while after he left. The fermentation tanks hummed their low, steady hum. The valley outside had gone dark. Somewhere in the west block, the old vines were doing what they had always done, quietly, patiently, indifferent to everything, except the work of becoming what they were. I turned off the barn light and walked back to the house under a sky full of stars. Derek had been planning it for 6 weeks. I knew this because Pete knew it, and Pete knew it because Roy Ashworth knew it, and Roy Ashworth knew it because Derek had been ordering supplies through the feed store account and talking openly about the event to anyone who stood still long enough to listen. This was Derek's way. He had always been a man who built momentum through announcement, who made things real by saying them out loud to as many people as possible before they had actually happened. As a boy, he had told his entire 4th grade class he was getting a dog 3 weeks before Margaret and I had agreed to any such thing. The dog had arrived eventually. The announcement had simply preceded the reality by enough time to become its own kind of pressure. The invitations went out in the 3rd week of May. Printed cards cream-colored with the new Haynes Legacy Winery logo embossed on the front. An evening of celebration and announcement, they read. Saturday, the 8th of June, 7 o'clock. Dress suggested smart casual, The property address was printed at the bottom, along with a note that valet parking would be available at the east gate. Valet parking, on my gravel driveway. Lena Marsh received an invitation. I knew because she called me the Thursday before the event, which she had done perhaps 4 times in the 10 years I had known her. And she asked me carefully whether I had anything I wanted to say on the record before the announcement on Saturday. I told her I did not. I thanked her for calling. I held on to that call for a moment after she hung up, because something in the careful way she had asked the question told me that Lena Marsh was beginning to understand that the story she had published in June of the previous year might not have been the complete story. That understanding would matter later. I filed it away. The day itself arrived with the particular clarity of a June morning in Sonoma Valley. The air washed and cool before the heat built the vines at the full green weight of early summer. The sky, the specific blue that appears for perhaps 6 weeks a year and makes you understand why people spend their whole lives trying to stay in this valley. I walked the rows at 5:30 as I always did. I said good morning to the West Block vines, to Margaret's post, to the 40-year accumulation of mornings that had made this land what it was. I did not know when I would do this again. I had not allowed myself to think too carefully about that. By 4 in the afternoon, the property was unrecognizable. Caterers had arrived at noon in 2 vans. String lights had been strung along the trellis wires of the East Block. The ones Margaret had always said made the Vineyard look like a photograph of itself. Round tables with white linens filled the clearing between the barn and the cave entrance. A temporary stage had been erected at the north end of the clearing, with a podium and a microphone, and a large printed banner behind it, the new logo 6 feet wide, backlit. Waitstaff in black moved between the tables arranging stemware, and somewhere a sound system was playing the kind of acoustic guitar music that had played in the video Derek had shown me 11 months ago, warm and uncomplicated, designed to make you feel that you were in the presence of something that had always been this way. I dressed in the one suit I owned, the dark gray one Margaret had bought me for our 25th anniversary dinner at a restaurant in Healdsburg. It still fit. I had not worn it since her funeral. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a moment, looking at the man in it, and thought that Margaret would have had something to say about the occasion. Something dry and precise that would have made me laugh despite everything. I could not quite hear what it was. I had been losing the sharpness of her voice for years, the specific rhythm of her sentences, and the loss of it was its own kind of grief, quieter than the first grief, but no less present. The guests began arriving at 7. I counted 73 people by 7:30, investors, press neighbors, industry contacts, the county supervisor, who had been photographed with Derek twice in the past month. 2 people I recognized from the Gazette. Lena Marsh arrived at 7:15 with her notebook and her camera and positioned herself at the edge of the gathering where a good reporter positions herself close enough to see everything, removed enough to see it clearly. Pete was already there. He had arrived at 6 in his good shirt, the blue flannel one Rosa had given him for Christmas, and he had taken a position near the barn door that gave him a clear line of sight to the stage, to the east gate, and to me. We exchanged a look across the clearing. Nothing more was needed. Marcus had driven down from Oregon the previous afternoon. He was standing at the far edge of the gathering near the entrance to the cave, in a dark jacket I had not seen before. He was holding a glass of wine he had not drunk. He looked like what he was, a man waiting for the right moment, patient in the way of someone who has learned that the right moment always comes if you do not rush it. Derek took the stage at 7:45. He was good at this. I want to be fair about that, the way I had tried to be fair about the first 3 weeks, because fairness is the only thing that keeps a record honest. Derek Haynes was a gifted public speaker, warm, fluent, capable of making a room of strangers feel included in something. He thanked the guests for coming. He talked about legacy and stewardship and the responsibility of carrying something forward. He told a story about his childhood in this valley, about growing up between these vines, about the moment he realized he needed to come home. The room was attentive. Several people were smiling. An investor near the front nodded along with the rhythm of Derek's sentences, the way people nod when they are hearing what they came to hear. I sat in the front row in a chair that had been placed there for me, and I watched my son command a room the way he had always been able to command a room, and I felt the full, complicated weight of that, the pride that does not disappear just because it is accompanied by grief, the love that does not stop being love just because it is also a wound. Derek reached into his jacket pocket and produced a sheet of paper. He looked down at it, then up at the crowd, and he smiled the wide, certain smile of a man about to say the thing he has been moving toward for a very long time. "Tonight," he said, "I am proud to announce the East Gate opened." Gloria Trent walked in at a pace that was neither hurried nor slow, the pace of a woman who had decided exactly how much of the room's attention she intended to claim, and was claiming precisely that amount. She was carrying a leather document folio under one arm. She was dressed in the dark blue suit she wore to court. She walked to the edge of the stage and stopped. The room shifted. The particular quality of attention changed the way it changes when something unscripted enters a scripted space. "I apologize for the interruption," Gloria said, and her voice carried to every corner of the clearing, without effort, the voice of a woman who had spent 30 years making herself heard in rooms that had not always wanted to hear her. "My name is Gloria Trent. I am an attorney licensed to practice in the state of California." She opened the folio. "I have a document here that I believe is directly relevant to this evening's announcement, and I think it is important that it be shared with everyone present before any further announcements are made." Derek's smile had not moved. It was still on his face, but it had stopped being a smile. It was a shape now held in place by the muscles around it, while the rest of his face tried to understand what was happening. Gloria lifted the first page from the folio. "This is a recorded deed transfer," she said, "filed with the Sonoma County Recorder's Office on the 14th of May, 2024. It documents the legal sale of the property known as Haynes Winery, located at this address, from Walter James Haynes, sole owner, to Marcus David Webb." She looked up from the page. "The transaction was completed 6 weeks ago. The property changed hands legally, publicly, and irrevocably at that time." The clearing was absolutely silent. 73 people and the Sonoma Valley night, and the string lights swaying slightly in the evening breeze, and not one sound from any human being present for a full 4 seconds that felt like something much longer. Then Gloria turned to the second page and the silence broke. The second page was a summary of the forged distribution contract. Gloria did not read every line. She did not need to. She read the date the parties named, the terms of the exclusive agreement. And then she read 4 words that landed in the clearing, like something dropped from a very great height, signed without owner's consent. She explained in the same measured cadence she had used throughout that under California law, a contract executed by means of forgery carries no legal weight, that the agreement with Meridian Beverage Group was void from the moment it was created, and that any party who had represented this contract as valid to investors, distributors, or lenders had done so without legal basis. She closed the folio and stepped back. The silence that followed lasted approximately 2 seconds. Then Cass broke it. She did not shout. That was the thing I would remember most clearly, that Cass Haynes, in the moment her entire architecture collapsed around her, did not raise her voice. She spoke with the same controlled precision she brought to everything. But the content of what she said, delivered in that reasonable tone, was the most unreasonable thing I had heard in 40 years of listening to people explain themselves. She turned to Derek. She took one deliberate step away from him, a physical separation that was also a declaration, the kind that cannot be walked back. And she said clearly enough for every one of the 73 people in that clearing to hear without straining. This was all his idea, every part of it. I raised concerns from the beginning. I just supported him because he was my husband, and I believed he knew what he was doing. Derek turned to look at her. His face had the particular quality of a man who has just discovered that the ground beneath him was never ground at all. His mouth opened and closed once without producing a sound. His jaw moved the way it moved when he was a boy, and someone had caught him in something he thought he had hidden well enough. So the rebranding was his decision. Cass continued, her voice gaining the smooth momentum of a prepared statement she had been holding in reserve. The investor meetings were his initiative. I had no knowledge of any contract irregularities. If there are legal issues here, they originate entirely with decisions Derek made without my full awareness. From somewhere in the crowd came a sound, not quite a gasp, but the collective intake of breath a group makes when it witnesses something it was not prepared to see and is not sure it should have seen. Lena Marsh's pen was moving. I did not need to look at her. I could feel it from 20 feet away. Derek found his voice. It came out stripped of the fluency that had carried him through the previous 45 minutes. Cass. Just her name. One word containing 20 years of a marriage arriving at its actual nature in front of 73 strangers and a journalist with a notebook. Cass did not look at him. I stood up from my chair in the front row. I did not move quickly. I was 68 years old, and I had learned a long time ago that the most powerful thing a person can do in a room full of noise is move slowly with absolute certainty about where they are going. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair, put it on, buttoned the middle button the way Margaret had always said a jacket should be worn. Then I looked at Derek, who was still at the edge of the stage with the expression of a man whose story had ended without his permission. You photographed every room of this house, I said, before you unpacked a single box. I looked at Cass. She met my eyes with the composure of someone who had not yet fully understood that composure was no longer useful. And you let her. I looked back at Derek. I gave you every morning I had. I did not give you the right to plan what came next for me while I was still standing here. Derek's jaw worked. Dad, I raised you to build something of your own, I said. I want you to go do that. I picked up my glass. The 2019 Reserve Zinfandel mine opened before any of them arrived and finished what was left in one slow, deliberate swallow. Set it down on the white linen without a sound. I walked toward the east gate. The crowd parted. Pete fell into step beside me. He pushed the gate open, and we walked through it together, out onto the gravel road under the eucalyptus windbreak that had been there since before I arrived. His truck was 20 yards down. We walked to it in the warm June night. He unlocked it. We got in. He started the engine and pulled out onto the road without asking where I wanted to go. He already knew. I wrote it the morning after. I sat at the small desk in the room Pete and Rosa had given me, the guest room of their house 2 miles down the valley road, where I had slept better than I had in 18 months, and I wrote by hand on plain white paper the way I had always written things that mattered. The letter was not long. I had never believed that important things required many words. When Derek and Cass arrived at the locked gate and found no one to let them in, when they called and received no answer, when they finally drove to the property manager Gloria had designated and were directed to a certified envelope, this letter was everything they found. It told them their belongings were in a climate-controlled storage unit in Santa Rosa, that Gloria held the access code, that 3 months of rent had been paid on a furnished apartment in Cloverfield if they needed time to make other arrangements. It told them that any further communication should go through Gloria's office. At the bottom below, the typed information Gloria had prepared, I wrote one sentence in my own hand. I didn't sell because I needed the money. I sold because this land deserves better than what you would have made of it. That was all. No explanation, no argument, no invitation to respond. Just the truth in my handwriting on plain white paper. That was the only thing left for them. Gloria mailed it certified on a Monday. Derek called my phone 11 times that week. I let every call go to voicemail. His messages moved through confusion, then anger, then something that sounded like grief, but had the texture of a man mourning a loss, rather than a wrong he had committed. 6 weeks later, Derek came to Pete's house. He sat across from me at Pete's kitchen table and he said he was sorry. His eyes were red and his voice cracked once on the word sorry, and I believed that the pain was real. I believed it the way you believe that a person is genuinely hurting, while also understanding that the hurt is for themselves and not for you. Then he said, "You never thought about what I needed, Dad." I looked at my son for a long moment. "I thought about what you needed every day for 41 years, I said. "The fact that you can sit here and say that tells me everything I needed to know." He left without another word. I watched his car disappear down Pete's driveway, and I felt the full weight of it, not anger, not satisfaction. Just the particular sorrow of a love that had been exactly what it was, and nothing more. Lena Marsh's article ran on a Thursday in the third week of September. She had spent 2 months on it. I knew because she had called me 3 times to verify details, dates, names, the specific language of the deed, transfer the timeline of the rebranding. She was doing what a careful journalist does when she understands that the story she is writing will correct a story she wrote before, which requires more precision and more honesty than the original ever did. The headline read, "The Real Story Behind Haynes Winery and the Son Who Came Home for the Wrong Reasons." By the following Monday, the Cloverfield Gazette had received more letters to the editor than in any week in its 62-year history. Roy Ashworth told Pete who told me. I did not read the letters. I did not need to. Marcus called me on a Wednesday morning in early October. Harvest had begun the previous week, the first picking under his ownership the estate Zinfandel from the East Block, 30 tons across 2 days in the September heat. His voice on the phone carried the particular exhaustion and aliveness of a man in the middle of harvest, which is the best state a winemaker can be in. "The West Block vines are ready," he said. "Margaret's Block. I'd like you to be here when we pick them." I drove out the following Saturday morning. Marcus met me at the gate, the same iron gate, the same stone pillars, but the sign above it had been changed. The new one read, "Haynes Winery Est, 1983. Stewardship Marcus Webb." My name was still there, first, largest, where it had always been. Pete had placed the old wooden chair back in its corner of the barn, exactly where it had lived for 11 years, angled toward the door with a clear line of sight down the main row. I stood in the barn doorway and looked at it for a long moment. Then I went and sat in it. Wrapped both hands around my coffee mug, looked out at the vines in the October light. Marcus came to the barn door at 7:30 with 2 glasses and said nothing, which was exactly right. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and took out the bottle I had carried from Pete's house that morning, wrapped in a dish towel, handled the way you handle something that cannot be replaced. The label was handwritten in Margaret's script, faded now, the ink gone pale at the edges, but legible if you knew what you were looking at. First Harvest, 1987. Below that, in smaller letters, her initials, M.E.H., Margaret Eleanor Haynes. I had kept 2 bottles. I had opened the first one the night she died, sitting alone in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, because I had needed something of hers in the room with me, and that was what I had. This was the second. I had been keeping it for a moment I would recognize when it arrived. I recognized this one. I opened the bottle. The cork came out cleanly, which after 37 years was its own small miracle. I poured 2 glasses, one for Marcus, one for myself, and the wine was the color of old garnets held up to October light dark and still moving alive, in the way that wine from good land and a good year stays alive longer than it has any right to. Marcus took his glass. He did not make a toast. He understood the way Pete understood the way Margaret had always understood, that some moments are diminished by words and honored by attention. We drank. Outside, the West Block vines ran in their long rows toward the ridge, the leaves gone red and gold in the October, turning the same colors they had turned every autumn for 37 years, reliable as anything I had ever known. I put both hands around my glass, felt the weight of it, felt the October sun coming through the barn door and laying itself across the floor in long strips, the way light moves through a place it has always belonged to. Everything in that barn was exactly where it had always been, and so for the first time in a very long time was I. I have told you this family story because I believe it needed to be told, not to make myself look brave. If there is anything I have learned from this grandpa stories kind of life from 40 years of farming land that did not care about my feelings, only my decisions, it is this: the people who love you should make you feel more like yourself, not less. The moment someone begins to shrink the space you occupy in your own life, pay attention. Do not wait as long as I did. God gave me 40 years with Margaret, and He gave me the clarity to act before it was too late. I am grateful for both. My personal belief is simple: dignity is not something you are given. It is something you protect. Every single day. This has been a Grandpa Stories chapter of my life I will carry quietly. It is a family story I hope you never have to live, but if you recognize pieces of it, trust what you know. If this family story reached something in, you leave a word in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have not yet subscribed, there are more stories coming that I think are worth your time. Thank you for staying until the end. The stories ahead contain some fictional elements created for reflection and understanding. If that is not what you are looking for today, no hard feelings. Choose what serves you best.